What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about Mike Myers and his thoughts on Canadian pride. So, Mike Myers is a very beloved Canadian actor, and most Americans, myself included, are very big fans. You got Wayne's World and Austin Powers, Shrek, The Cat in the Hat, if you're into that. And so today, I'm interested in hearing his thoughts on being Canadian and what that means to him, and taking pride in being Canadian, which is something that we don't hear very much about here in America. So I'm quite interested to see what he has to say. So, with that being said, let's take a look.
Mike, so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So you moved away 33 years ago.
Yes.
We kind of thought you'd forgotten about us.
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah, your book is like...
Oh my gosh, he seemed genuinely hurt by that. He seemed genuinely hurt by that. Where's Mike Myers live? I don't really know, actually, but he hasn't been in Canada. He's still very much Canadian. He's like, no, I love Canada.
kind of thought you'd forgotten about us.
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah, your book is like, it's all full of, like, you're almost like a Canadian...
I'm almost like a Canadian.
A hoarder.
Me? Well, that's what happens. There's nobody more Canadian than a Canadian who no longer lives in Canada. And so...
That's funny. That's a good one. You're never more Canadian than a Canadian that's not in Canada, because I guess you really, really learn to appreciate Canada and everything that comes with being Canadian when you're not home in Canada. That's when it's very obvious to you. That's funny, but also like a pretty interesting, like introspective analysis there.
You know, I say in the book, and a lot of my friends in America accuse me of enjoying being Canadian. I go, I do enjoy being Canadian. What's not to enjoy? It's not a perfect place. You know, as my dad would say, in a perfect world, you don't need utopia. But
So I just got to stop it for a second. He said something about his American friends accuse him or poke fun that he really enjoys being Canadian. I'd love to know what that means exactly. You really like being Canadian. What does that mean? Like Mike Myers like goes for the extra large maple syrup at the grocery store? Like what does that mean even? Anyway.
But I challenge in the history of nation states to find any other country that's tried to get it right as much as Canada has. You know what I mean? And just even in the act of trying to get it right is the right thing to do.
Wow. I don't know. Mike Myers is like a comedian. You don't necessarily expect him to be so analytical and so philosophical about this. It's pretty cool. Obviously, he's gotten to where he is by being a very intelligent person, but I've never really seen an interview with Mike Myers, the person. So he says, Canada doesn't get everything right, which no country does, but that takes a lot of guts to admit that. But he says Canada tries to get the most things right as possible, or at least attempts to, which says a lot, and I agree.
We were very politically correct at times, and I always think, wasn't politically correct just being considerate and nice for the most part? You know what I mean? One can get trapped in it, but
Sure.
We're very polite people.
Sure.
When does that get bad? Believe me, all you have to do is go to a country where people aren't polite. And you kind of love the Canadian standoff of two Canadians in a doorway. After you. Oh, nobody after you. After you.
I love this. Mike Myers is so likable. What the heck? I shouldn't be surprised. Like, I'm a big fan of his work. But, yeah, so he's basically saying, as a world traveler and someone who's been probably everywhere, it's made him really appreciate Canadian culture. Even the parts of Canadian culture that are quote unquote taken too far. He's like, well, that's just part of trying. That's putting an effort in, and has good intentions, at least.
When you're just sitting there in New York, you'd be like, go, right? But in Canada, it's fantastic. That's who we are.
But are we too polite? Do we lack confidence? I mean, you've
Oh.
decided to live there. You've succeeded there.
I do love America. It's a great place to make things.
Ah. Hey, I'm going to make that my new ringtone. Mike Myers saying, I do love America. I do love America. I do love America. Then I just pick up my phone finally. It's like, hello. That'll be my ringtone. But he's saying so he lives in America. I didn't know that. He says it's a great place to make things. It makes sense. Like he's an actor. He's an artist. Like he creates things. He's an entertainer. Makes sense that he'd probably want to be near Hollywood and all that stuff.
And I make things, you know what I mean? I miss Canada. You can take the boy out of Canada, but you can't take the Canada out of the boy. I'm British by heritage.
Hey, your dad was staunchly British.
Yeah.
He didn't like your accent.
No, we had a Liverpool accent, talk like that, like, great, love it. And then I would say, hey, Dad, pass the sauce. He'd go, sauce. Because you hear that, missus? What a terrible accent our children have. I go,
No way. Mike Myers' parents had that accent from Britain. And Mike Myers was has a Canadian accent. Like the first in his family, first generation, I guess.
you're the limey freak, dude. You're in my country.
We don't think we have an accent. Canadian, there is no Canadian.
Yes,
accent.
there is a belief that in the integer of the English language that we are at zero linguistically, accent-wise. It's not true. We have a very thick Canadian. The accent is very, very pronounced, more than I think Canadians think that it is.
Right. Yes, I think that's true as well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't know what is the American accent. Like, I don't know. like Canadians say bag, so if you make fun of Americans, we're like bag, tag. Like that sounds silly to you, maybe. But also Canadians have like a rhythm and a cadence to speaking. It's hard to like quantify even, but it's definitely there. Like a speech pattern even. Anyway. And Mike Myers agrees with me anyway. So what more do I need?
It is.
Well, the one we always hear is oot. Say oot again.
Sure.
We don't say oot.
Out. But there's I think, is it called a diphthong? I'm looking like as if there's a linguistic
Expert.
linguist here.
Yes.
Would somebody find the linguist, please? Thank you.
That's true. Most Americans think Canadians say a boot. Let's go out in a boot. And it's like, okay, calm down, people. It's like a boat. At most, it's a boat. Maybe even less than that. But it is more of an O sound, yes.
It's out.
And we don't really say A all the time.
Yes, we do. We really do. And there's another thing, too, of Canadian women.
That's funny. Mike Myers is here to be like, okay, yes, we do. Like, stop. And it's okay. Embrace it. It's like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, and I'm sure not all Canadians sound the same or say A, but it's like, that's funny. Mike Myers has been living in America long enough where even he is like, yes, we say A more than people around the world. We do.
Women, as a tendency, but not as a rule, there's a, oh yeah. And in America, an American was telling my sister-in-law in America a story, and she was being polite, saying, so he's like, yeah, I was on the subway today. And she went, oh yeah. And the American was like, I'll get to the end of the story. You don't have to shut me down. Because it's
This is like a Canadian politeness thing. Maybe Canadians don't even realize that you do it. That is so funny. That's funny.
sounded like, oh yeah, will you stop talking?
Well, exactly.
But instead, we're saying, I'm interested. I'm listening to you.
Know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's passive aggressive. Maybe we're not really that polite. We're just
Oh, gosh.
not telling you what we really think.
There is a little bit of that. There's a little. we will put up a wall of pleasant to people. To
Right. That's what I was wondering if that's what they were getting at. Like, the politeness only goes so far, and you can only be polite about so many things before it's like, okay, I'm just being polite because I really hate this person, or I want them to go away, or it's a front, or I hope. That's funny. Is there any way to tell when a Canadian is being genuinely polite, or just polite as like a front, or
Americans mostly.
Yeah. Well, we feel very superior right now watching what's happening in the elections in the States.
No, I bet Canadians are doing a jig right now. Look at those Yankee idiots. I'm joking. I'm kidding. But for the most part.
I love it. Oh, Mike Myers is so funny.
We're just not a terribly angry people. Hockey, of course, would make you think that what I just said is a complete lie. But, the crowds at Maple Leaf or now Air Canada Centre, like if the other team does a nice passing play, you will get a round of applause.
Okay.
I wore a Toronto Maple Leafs shirt to a New York Rangers game, and I evidently found out stuff about my mother. I had no idea. Evidently, my mother's a prostitute. There we have it.
Even Canadians passionate about hockey, but also willing to be cordial about it, unlike America. Oh my gosh, this is very funny to me. How I'm learning a lot about Canadian culture today, just from Mike Myers. I think it's because he's willing to be so very honest and upfront about it all. I really appreciate.
It's funny what you learn in a hockey game, huh?
But do Canadians need to be more competitive? You say it's like Americans.
Here's what I say. This is just my opinion. This whole book is just my opinion. I'm happy to hear Canadians' opinions. You know what I'm saying? And I am actually. I am fascinated by because it's not a famous experience being Canadian. We don't have if you're English, you can say it's a little bit like Harry Potter. It's a little bit like, or if you're American, it's like a little bit like anything you've seen on Disney. And in Canada, there's no real film for us to point to about a Canadian childhood.
True. Very true. This is probably one of the biggest reasons why Americans don't know much about Canadian culture or what Canadian life is like. There's not much to go on for us. I'm sure there's Canadian movies, and I watched Degrassi. I mean, but God forbid if Degrassi is all you have to go on about Canadian life, like you're gonna get a very interesting impression. But yeah, Mike Myers is right. The Canadian life, the Canadian experience, there's not an easy way to share that with the rest of the world, at least from my American point of view. Probably one of the biggest reasons, like, I have started this channel and I learn about Canada. Like, at least we have the internet now. That's kind of and YouTube, that's kind of the way to learn about the Canadian experience. Listening to Mike Myers talk about it, that's the way. But up until now, there's been no way. So most Americans, have no idea what Canadian life is like. He's right.
It often feels like a dream, you know what I mean?
Beachcombers? No?
You can't point that to anybody because nobody outside of Canada would have seen the Beachcombers, which is
No one's seen anything? There's nothing?
Beachcombers? What is Beachcombers? Wait a minute, now I'm interested. What is that? I've never heard of that before. That's funny that the interviewer brings up Beachcombers, was it? I don't even know the name. It's like, that's Canadian culture. It's like, no, Mike Myers is right. I have never heard of that as an American. Huh.
No
Anna Green Gables. And I can hardly
Anna
say.
Green Gables.
Okay, so growing up in Scarborough. So remember when she got her pigtails in the inkwell? Well, it's not like that. But the point is, you know what I mean? There really isn't. We're not a culture for export. That's okay. But everything else balances it out. I'll often say, we may not have put a man on the moon, but we've been awfully nice to the man on Earth. And then I'll say, but having said that, why can't we put a man on the moon? We actually could do both. That's what's so fantastic. I think once you're of the mindset that we're a country of alignment and a country of cooperation, then actually we're in a better position to do anything, is the truth of it. You know what I mean? And that's my feeling about Canada. And I think civility will be our greatest legacy.
Wow. So interesting. Yeah. These thoughts and analysis of Canadian culture by Mike Myers, of all people, this is shockingly deep. Like that really amazing, actually. Like, I think he is so spot on about some of these things. Really interesting to hear this point of view about Canada from Canadians. And I don't know, do Canadians out there, do you agree with this? Like, do you feel like the rest of the world doesn't really understand Canada and Canadian culture as much as like America has lots of movies set in America, about America, and yeah, the UK does, but I'm sure every country does. Canada, I'm sure, has movies about Canada, but Americans aren't out here watching that stuff. So interesting stuff.
When you went to SNL, you formed a bit of a bond with Lorne Michaels, another Canadian. He
Yes.
took you under his wing
He really did.
and he said as a Canadian there would be two things that would be different.
Well, he said, you'll do well, which is very, very nice, especially I'm scared out of my mind. He said, because you're Canadian and you'll study. You'll have the necessary built-in, baked-in humility of being a Canadian that, I better learn how this works, right? And
Yeah, I mean, the Canadian attitude is very, very, very powerful. I think that's what Mike Myers is trying to get at a lot in this video. The Canadian attitude is very powerful. Open-mindedness, getting along, community, respect, cooperation, politeness, all that stuff. Like, very, very, very powerful and very, very underrated qualities that I think Americans really are sorely lacking in, to be honest.
I'll pay attention to the rules, We love rules in Canada. And I'm just saying, go to a country that has no rules and see how quickly you go, boy, I really miss rules. It's okay, rules. Of course, everything in its correct measure. But
Yeah.
he said, you're not going to enjoy things being unfair. He has said, your heart will be broken that many of the talented people that you meet, that character and talent don't go hand in hand in equal measure.
Is that true?
100% true. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. For Americans, they'll say, did you meet so-and-so? And they'll say, what's he like? Canadian will say, was he nice? They need to be nice in Canada.
Really? No way. Does that sum it up right there? Wow. So interesting. Mike Myers is blowing me away today. What the heck? We say in America, what were they like? Because maybe we don't expect the best in people? I don't know what this really means. Canadians say, was he nice? There's an expectation or a want of them to be a nice person. That's the expectation. Very, very different way and expectations in America versus Canada. Wow.
And most cultures don't need you to be nice.
Wayne
Yes.
was created here.
Yes.
He's a secret Canadian?
No, he's very much, I'm
Because he's
not-
from Aurora, not Aurora, Ontario.
I know, but here I am on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Every week I think I'm getting fired. I did a show here on Canadian TV, and I did Wayne on it.
Hi, I'm Wayne Campbell, and this is my Power Minute. All right.
And I thought, I wonder if it should be Canadian. I turned to somebody, what's like, and I describe Scarborough, and somebody says Aurora, Illinois. It was Christine Zander, one of the writers on Saturday Night Live.
Really?
I said, there's Aurora, Ontario. I handed it in that night. That's how things work on Saturday Night Live. It's an under-rehearsed Broadway opening once a week, is what Gilda Radner called it.
Wow.
And she also said it's a monster, an insatiable monster that eats your material insatiably. The amount of decisions that you think are based on a lot of time of thought and a little bit, no, you have to just write or you're not on the show.
Interesting. That's really interesting, hearing about his career at Saturday Night Live. And basically, he had to Americanize Wayne, who was originally maybe Canadian as a character. But he was on Saturday Night Live in America.
So the decision to have him be from Scarborough, but have him be from the suburbs, I made no concession to a Chicago accent. It's not like he talks like, oh my God, my dad gave me $1.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It's absolutely not true. He has a Scarborough accent, you know what I mean? So it's just little letters to home within the whole piece.
Well, in lots of what you do, there's hints of Canadiana.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
can't
sneak
help
it in.
it. I do. Little packages home.
Wow.
It is interesting how very little the world knows about us.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
Literally. Yeah, we'll say it again. I'll say it again, like, that's literally the purpose of this whole YouTube channel. It's based on what Mike Myers is saying here. That's amazing.
Shocking. And that's fine, but that's where we're at. You know?
So how much on Saturday Night Live, how much did they talk about us?
About Canada? Well, it's funny. A friend of mine came up to see, I was at Second City in Toronto. A friend of mine came to see the show, American. And there was an anti-American song in the show, which I actually didn't want to do because I don't think it's interesting to be anti-American. I think it's interesting to just be Canadian. But
too easy, not even funny, not enough of a challenge for him. Anti-American, making fun of America, too easy for him.
it was a funny song and whatever. And the friend said, "Wow, I had no idea that you guys thought that much about us." The American said about Canadians. And I said, "Well, what do you think of us?" And he said, "We don't." And I was like, wow, game, set, and match, man.
Oh, man. Man, that's a tough one right there. Because sadly, and it's not just Canada, but Americans really don't think that much about Canada. That's true. Like, that is the cold, hard truth. But with that being said, Americans, we don't think about any other country in the world. It's just America. It's nothing against Canada. It's just USA, America, like obsession, stuck in our bubble. But that's funny that Mike Myers had that experience, because it does feel like Canadians are exposed to America much, much, much more than Americans are exposed to Canada. That there's definitely an imbalance, for sure. Oh, and I think that's it. That's the end. Wow! Holy cow. That was amazing. Like, truly, I genuinely really enjoyed this interview. Mike Myers has impressed me so much today. I was a fan of his work. Now I'm a fan of him as a person. So smart, so witty, so quick, so analytical, so his observations are spot on, they're interesting. So much to say on Canadian culture and American culture. Really, really pleasant surprise today. Like, I was just expecting a, fun little interview with Mike Myers, like on Canadian Pride, whatever that means to him. And it's like, I'm blown away. That was awesome. I quite enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on Canadian Pride, Canadian culture, any of the stuff that Mike Myers was talking about today. That'd be very interesting to hear about from a Canadian's point of view. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and Canadian culture and learning things about Canada, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.